to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. Tonight you're going to drift into a quiet woodland night and follow the gentle journey of an owl who loves the rain. Settle yourself in just as you are. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw loosen. If it feels comfortable, allow your eyelids to grow heavy, as though they already know the way toward rest. You can begin with a slow breath in, cool and unhurried, and then a long breath out, as if you're quietly fogging a window. Another breath in, gathering calm. Another breath out, releasing the day. Imagine the world around you dimming into kindness, a room that grows quieter, a moment that asks nothing of you. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to replay anything. You can simply be here, gently arriving at sleep. And as you breathe, picture a place where night is soft, velvet, where trees stand like old friends, and where rain doesn't bring hurry or inconvenience, but comfort. In this place, each raindrop is a hush, each ripple a lullaby, and somewhere in the shelter of the forest, an owl listens with a tender heart, as though the rain is speaking just to him. With every breath, you can drift closer. With every exhale, you can let go a little more. The story will carry itself. You only need to float along. Somewhere beyond the edges of waking, in a forest that held its secrets kindly, there was an owl who loved the rain. He lived where the trees grew tall and patient, their trunks silvered by mist and time, their branches layered like quiet thoughts. Moss draped the roots in soft green shawls, and ferns unfurled like slow, careful hands. In the daytime, sunlight filtered down in gentle spears, turning dust into drifting glitter. But the owl's favorite hours were the hours of night, when the forest felt like a deep, listening bowl, and every sound landed softly like a feather. The owl's home was a hollow in an old cedar, tucked behind a curtain of ivy and sheltered by a bend in the trunk that kept out harsh winds. Inside, the air was faintly scented with warm wood and dried leaves. There were a few smooth stones, arranged in a loose circle, as if they had chosen to rest together. A soft lining of down and pine needles cradled the place where he slept. The cedar had stood through seasons and storms, and it held the owl as a lullaby holds a drowsy mind. He was not an especially large owl, nor an especially small one. He was simply himself, with mottled feathers, the color of bark and shadow, and eyes that shone like polished amber when moonlight found them. His wings were broad and silent, made for slipping through dark air without disturbing a single leaf, and his heart, gentle and curious, beat with a strange affection for the sound that many creatures hurried away from. Rain. Other animals tolerated it, some disliked it, some hid until it passed, shaking droplets from their fur afterward with relief. But this owl, he listened for it. He could sense rain before it arrived, as if the sky's mood touched the forest first. The air would change, growing cooler, thicker, softer. Scents became stronger. Wet earth, crushed pine, the sharp sweetness of cedar. Even the quiet of the woods shifted, as though everything was pausing in anticipation. When the first drops began, the owl would open his eyes in the hollow. Not startled, not annoyed, not burdened. He would simply smile in the way owls did, a small easing of his face, a calmness spreading through him like warmth through a cup of tea. He loved the way rain spoke in many voices. On broad leaves it tapped like fingertips. On needles it whispered like a secret. On bark it drummed in steady, patient rhythms. On the surface of the pond it danced in countless tiny circles, each one blooming and fading like a thought slipping into sleep. Rain made the whole forest feel closer, tucked together beneath the same soft roof. It blurred sharp edges. It dimmed distant sounds. It wrapped the night in a veil and turned the world into a gentle mystery. The owl liked mysteries that didn't demand answers, only attention. On one particular evening, clouds arrived in slow procession, like gray ships sailing across the sky. The sun had slipped away earlier, leaving a lingering lavender smear near the horizon. As darkness deepened, the forest grew calm. Crickets softened their song. A breeze wandered through, mild and curious, stirring leaves and then growing still again. In the cedar hollow, the owl shifted, listening. The air carried that familiar weight. The promise of rain pressed into every breath. He could feel it in the quiet between sounds. A drop fell. It landed on a leaf outside the cedar and made a delicate, shining tap. Then another, each one a note in a song that was slowly finding its melody. The owl rose. He tucked his feet beneath him and leaned forward toward the opening of the hollow, peering into the night. The first drops turned into a steady fall, and the forest responded with an orchestra of soft percussion. Leaves trembled. Needles bowed. The ivy curtain caught droplets and let them roll down its vines like beads on a string. The owl's feathers puffed slightly, not in alarm, but in pleasure, as though he were savoring the coolness of the air. He stepped to the edge of the hollow and spread his wings. He didn't have to fly. He could have stayed tucked inside, safe and warm. But rain called to him the way a lullaby calls to someone who has been restless for too long. It promised comfort, a kind of drifting peace that only night and water could make together. So he glided out. His wings carried him into the falling rain without a sound. Drops slid across his feathers and broke into tiny rivulets that ran away and disappeared. The rain did not feel harsh. It felt like the forest was being gently brushed clean, washed of dust and worry. Below him, the ground darkened as it drank. Paths of earth became glossy, almost black. Puddles formed in dips and hollows. A faint mist rose, soft as breath, hovering around roots and stones. The owl flew low, weaving between trunks. He moved as though he were part of the night itself, made of shadow and calm. He listened. Rain made the world feel both smaller and larger at once. Smaller because it drew a boundary of softness around everything, a close, intimate space where sounds didn't travel far. Larger because within that boundary there were endless details, endless small wonders. The way droplets gathered and fell from a fern tip, the way a spider's web caught beads of water and turned them into jeweled threads, the way a rivulet found a path down a stone, curving like a sleepy smile. The owl drifted toward a clearing where the trees opened enough for the sky to be seen. Here, rain fell more freely, not interrupted by leaves. In the center of the clearing, a pond rested like a dark mirror. On calm nights, it reflected moonlight. On rainy nights, it became a living texture, ripples overlapping, blooming and vanishing, bloom and vanish, like the slow pulse of deep relaxation. The owl landed on a branch that stretched over the water. The bark beneath his feet was slick and cool. He settled there steady and calm and watched the pond's surface. He could have watched it for a very long time. He often did. There was a gentle satisfaction in seeing the rain touch the pond and disappear, leaving only circles. It reminded him of thoughts, arriving softly, expanding, fading. No need to cling, no need to chase, just the quiet cycle of appearing and dissolving. The owl closed his eyes halfway, letting the sound wash over him. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a stream began to sing more loudly as rain fed it. The stream's voice was a winding murmur, a continuous ribbon of sound that soothed the spaces between heartbeats. Near the pond's edge, a frog shifted in the reeds. It didn't croak loudly tonight. It simply moved, content in the wetness. A small creature, perhaps a mouse or a shrew, darted under a fallen log and disappeared into its shelter. The forest did not fight the rain, it accepted it. The owl loved that acceptance. It made him feel safe. He stayed on the branch until his feathers held the pleasant coolness of water, until the rain's rhythm had sunk into him so deeply that it felt like his own breathing. Then, as if guided by a gentle idea, he lifted his head and looked toward the far side of the clearing. There, barely visible through the soft curtain of rain, was an old stone path. It wasn't a path made by human hands, not anymore. If it ever had been, time had taken it back. Stones lay unevenly, half swallowed by moss. Ferns leaned over it. Fallen leaves collected in the dips. Yet the path still led somewhere, and the owl had always felt curious about where it ended. Tonight the rain made the path shimmer. Water clung to the stones and reflected faint light, making a trail of muted silver. The owl's heart warmed with quiet wonder. He decided to follow it, not out of urgency, but out of the gentle pull of discovery. Rain was good company for wandering. It made every step slow and deliberate, every sound softened, every moment feel like a dream. He took off from the branch and glided to the first mossy stone. His feet touched down softly. He folded his wings and stood, rain beating on his head and sliding down his face in tiny streams. The owl began to walk. Owls were not known for walking long distances, but he didn't mind. The ground was soft, and the path was not steep. Each stone was cool beneath his feet, each patch of moss plush and springy. Rain threaded through everything, turning the world into one long, quiet sigh. As he moved, the forest changed around him. The pond fell behind. Trees grew closer again. The path curved between thick trunks, then dipped into a small hollow where the air was even more misty, as if the rain had decided to linger there. In the hollow, mushrooms rose like little umbrellas, their caps glossy with water. Some were pale as moonlight, others glowed faintly with warm color, like embers that had remembered how to be gentle. Rain dotted their surfaces, and each drop sat for a moment before sliding off, leaving a clean trail. The owl paused to watch a droplet travel down the curve of a mushroom cap. It moved slowly, gathering other droplets along the way, growing heavier, rounder. Then it let go, falling into the moss with a soft, satisfying plop. He felt something in his chest loosen, as though that droplet had carried away a tiny bit of tension from the world. He continued. Farther along, the path crossed a small bridge made of fallen branches and stones. Beneath it, a trickle of water ran, newly formed by the rain. It wasn't quite a stream, not yet, but it was learning how to be one. It found the easiest route, slipping around pebbles, threading beneath roots, gathering courage as it moved. The owl watched the water for a while. He admired the way it didn't struggle. It simply flowed. It did not argue with rocks. It did not insist on straightness. It curved and wandered and found its own gentle solution. He stepped across the bridge and followed the path as it rose slightly toward a stand of birch trees. Their white trunks shone through the rain like pale pillars. Leaves fluttered, catching droplets and shaking them loose in little showers. The birches made a different rain music than the cedars and pines. Their leaves were smaller and the sound was lighter, like soft applause. The owl's ears, attuned to every whisper of the night, delighted in the change. Rain was never the same song twice, even in the same forest. It found new instruments, new tones, new rhythms. As he walked among the birches, something subtle began to shift. The air grew not just wet, but luminous, as though the rain carried faint light within it. The owl lifted his face, blinking droplets from his eyes. In the space between the birches, a dim glow hovered. It was not bright. It was like the memory of a lantern seen through fog. It pulsed gently, slowly, as if breathing. The owl felt no fear. Rain had taught him that mystery could be soft. He approached the glow with quiet steps. The path seemed to lead directly toward it, and the birches leaned inward, their branches forming a gentle arch overhead. Rain fell through that arch in thin lines, like delicate strings. As the owl drew closer, he saw that the glow was not a single light, but many tiny lights, drifting together like a loose cluster of fireflies. Yet they were not quite fireflies. They moved more slowly, like floating seeds. Their light was steady and calm, not flickering with haste. The owl watched them, head tilted. He had seen fireflies in summer, and he had watched dew shine on spider webs, and he had glimpsed moonlight caught in raindrops. But these little lights felt different. They seemed to belong to the rain itself. The cluster drifted nearer, and the owl noticed something else. Each light carried a tiny drop of water at its center, as if the glow wrapped the droplet like a warm scarf. Rain lights, he thought, though he didn't know where the word came from. It arrived in his mind as easily as a dream image already complete. The rain lights hovered around him for a moment, unafraid. The owl felt their calm like a quiet hand on his shoulder. They drifted in a slow circle as if welcoming him. He did not reach for them. He did not chase them. He simply stood and listened to the rain, allowing the moment to settle. One of the rain lights drifted closer to his face. The droplet within it trembled, and then, with the gentlest release, it fell. It landed on the owl's forehead. The sensation was cool, but also oddly comforting, as if that single droplet carried a tiny blessing. The owl blinked, and the rain light drifted away again, joining the others. The cluster began to move down the path, deeper into the birches, and the owl, drawn by quiet curiosity, followed. The rain lights floated at a pace that encouraged slowness. They did not rush, they did not dart. They moved as though the night itself were rocking them. The path continued, winding gently, and the owl followed through mist and rain. The lights seemed to know where they were going. They drifted through a curtain of hanging branches and into a place the owl had never visited, though it was not far from his cedar home. It was a glade. The trees opened around a circular patch of ground covered in thick moss that looked like a green cushion. At the center of the glade stood a stone taller than the owl, smooth and dark, worn by time and weather. Rain ran down its sides in thin streams, and the stone gleamed as if it held the memory of countless storms. Around the stone, the rain sounded different. It wasn't louder or softer. It was deeper, as though the glade had its own way of listening. The air felt still, even with rain falling, as if the place was holding its breath in reverence. The rain lights drifted toward the stone and hovered around it, their glow forming a soft halo. The owl stepped onto the moss and felt it give beneath his feet, springy and warm despite the wetness. He stood a little way from the stone, watching. For a long moment, nothing happened except the rain, and that was more than enough. The owl felt his thoughts slow. The rhythm of droplets became a steady pulse, and his breathing matched it without effort. Then the stone seemed to sigh. It was not a sound exactly, not like wind or voice. It was a feeling like the moment when a tight knot loosens. The rain lights brightened slightly, and the streams running down the stone shimmered as though they carried starlight. The owl's eyes widened, not with alarm, but with wonder. A faint shape began to appear in the rain itself, just in front of the stone. At first, it was only a thicker curtain of water, a slightly different texture in the falling drops. But slowly, as the rain continued, the shape took form. A figure made of rain and mist, gently outlined, never sharp, always shifting. It looked like a tall, slender presence, with a head like a hood and shoulders that flowed into the air like draped fabric. Where eyes might be, there were two soft glows, like moonlight seen through clouds. The owl remained still. He did not need to do anything. He only needed to witness. The presence tilted its head, mirroring the owl's curious posture. Rain slid through its form, and yet the form remained, as if the rain itself enjoyed becoming something for a while. The owl understood, without words, that this was a rain spirit, not a dramatic, thunderous being, not a storm bringer. This spirit was quiet, like steady rainfall that lasted through the night and nourished everything by morning. The rain spirit lifted an arm, and the motion was like a wave moving through water. Droplets gathered at its fingertips, forming a small glowing bead. The bead drifted toward the owl floating on the air. It moved slowly, giving him time to feel safe, to feel ready. When it reached him, it hovered in front of his beak. The owl leaned forward slightly and touched it with the tip of his beak as gently as possible. The bead broke apart into a fine mist that settled over his feathers. It felt like cool silk. It felt like relief. In that moment, the owl remembered something he had always known but had never named. Rain was not merely weather. Rain was a caretaker. Rain was a soft hand that soothed the forest, a patient voice that reminded every living thing to drink, to breathe, to soften. The rain spirit's glowing eyes seemed to smile. The owl stood beneath the falling water and felt his body relax even more. His wings loosened, his shoulders lowered, his heart slowed into an easy rhythm. It was the same quiet comfort he felt in his cedar hollow, but deeper, as if the glade was a place where comfort lived more strongly. The rain spirit turned slightly, as if inviting him to look around. The owl followed the gesture with his gaze. In the glade, the rain was doing gentle work. It was filling tiny dips in the moss with clear water, making small pools that reflected the rain lights above. It was running along grooves in the stone like silver threads. It was tapping softly on leaves at the edge of the clearing, creating a ring of sound that felt like the forest humming. The owl noticed, too, that the air in the glade carried the faint scent of something sweet, like crushed herbs after rain. It was calming, grounding, as though the place itself breathed out peace. The rain spirit lifted both arms now, and the rain lights rose slightly higher. Their glow softened, spreading like gentle fog. The owl felt drowsiness begin to gather at the edges of his awareness, not heavy or sudden, but like a blanket being drawn up slowly. He could have curled right there on the moss. He could have closed his eyes and let the rain sing him to sleep. Yet there was another feeling too. Gratitude. A quiet, warm gratitude that made him want to offer something in return, even if only a small gesture. Owls did not sing like songbirds. They did not have bright trills or complicated melodies, but they had their own voice. Low, steady calls that belonged to night. The owl lifted his head and let out a soft hoot, not loud, not piercing, but gentle. It rolled through the glade like a slow wave. It was an offering, a thank you, shaped into sound. The rain spirit listened. The rain lights drifted closer as if responding. The spirit's form shimmered and the streams down the stone gleamed a little brighter. The owl felt, in the way one feels warmth from a hearth, that his offering had been received. The spirit moved toward the stone, and as it did, its outline began to blur. The rain lights dipped, then rose again, like a nod. The owl understood. The rain spirit did not need to remain. It had come to remind the forest of its own quiet magic, and to remind the owl that his love of rain was not strange, but fitting. The spirit dissolved into falling droplets, returning to what it was made of. The rain lights faded slowly, their glow sinking into the air, like embers settling into ash, until they were gone. The glade was still, only the rain remained, steady and soothing, and the stone stood in the center, dark and calm, water flowing down its sides. The owl sat on the moss, letting the moment settle around him like a soft cloak. He felt as though his mind had been gently rinsed clean, leaving only a quiet spaciousness. For a while, he simply listened. Rain pattered, leaves whispered, water trickled, the forest breathed. Eventually, the owl rose. He did not feel hurried to leave, but he sensed that it was time to return to his cedar hollow, where sleep waited like a familiar friend. The glade would remain, the stone would remain, the rain would continue its patient work. He stepped back onto the path. The birches guided him out, their pale trunks glowing faintly in the wet night. The path led him gently downward. The small bridge waited, and beneath it the trickle had grown into a more confident stream, murmuring steadily. The owl crossed and paused to watch the water again. It still did not argue with rocks. It still found its way, soft and sure. He felt that softness in his own body now, a sense of ease that made every movement unhurried. He continued through the hollow with mushrooms, their caps still glossy, droplets still sliding, still falling. Everything seemed quieter now, as though the rain had turned the forest's volume down to the perfect level. By the time he reached the pond clearing, the rain had softened. It was still falling, but with less insistence. The pond's surface had fewer ripples now, each one wider, slower, as if the water itself was growing sleepy. The owl returned to the branch over the pond and settled for a moment, watching the last of the rain's dancing circles. The night felt deep and kind. Mist hovered close to the surface of the water. and the trees around the clearing stood like gentle guardians. In the distance, a cloud shifted, and a faint hint of moonlight appeared, pale and diffused. It did not break the calm. It only added a soft glow to the wet leaves, turning them into quiet mirrors. The owl took off again, gliding back toward his cedar. His wings moved through the damp air with effortless grace. Rain slid from his feathers. Drops fell from the tips of branches as he passed, releasing little sighs into the night. At last he reached the cedar tree. The ivy curtain hung heavy with water, but it still formed a cozy veil. The owl slipped through and landed at the opening of his hollow. Inside, the familiar scent of wood and pine needles greeted him. He stepped in and shook his feathers gently, sending a fine spray of droplets into the air. The droplets caught dim light for a moment, then disappeared. He settled into the soft lining, tucking his feet beneath him and folding his wings close. Outside, rain continued, quieter now, as if it too were settling into rest. The owl's eyes grew heavier. He listened to the rain's softened rhythm on the cedar bark, on the ivy leaves on the forest floor below. Each sound was a gentle cue, a reminder that the world was safe enough to sleep. His breathing slowed. His heart beat steadily, like a calm drum far away. In his mind, the glade returned, like a dream. The moss, the stone, the rain lights, the feeling of being washed clean of worry. He did not hold the images tightly. He let them drift, like clouds drifting across a night sky. The rain, patient and kind, kept singing. And now as the owl rested, the whole forest seemed to rest with him. Trees stood quiet, the pond's ripples faded, the stream's murmur softened into the background. Even the wind seemed to move more gently, as though it didn't want to disturb the peace. The owl's eyelids slipped closed. The rain fell, softly, steadily, a lullaby made of water and night. And as the owl slept, the forest continued its gentle rhythm, washing and soothing, breathing and dreaming. Now the story can become even quieter. The cedar hollow is warm, the rain is a hush, the night is a blanket. Breath in, slow. Breath out, easy. The owl is sleeping and nothing is required of him, nothing is required of you. Thoughts can come and go like ripples on the pond. They can widen, fade, and disappear. You don't need to follow them. You can simply rest beneath the steady sound of imagined rain. The forest holds you in softness. The rain keeps time and sleep arrives the way it always does. Gently, naturally, when you stop reaching and allow yourself to drift. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.